Welcome to the Business of Race podcast, where we address issues of race and racism, how they impact businesses, and what employers can do to address these issues to create a healthier work environment for everyone. I'm your host, Regina Newkirk-Rucci, the Director of Equity for C.R.O.W.N, a racial equity and justice nonprofit located here in Jacksonville, Florida. And today, I have the honor and privilege of being joined by my very dear friend, as well as the CEO of C.R.O.W.N, Dr. Kimberly Allen. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Regina. Thank you for having me. It's been a while since I've been in the boardroom.
It has been a minute, right? So we got to have you in here more often. I know you're out busy trying to solve all the world's problems and address racism and all of the various issues we are facing in the state today. So thank you for doing that, but it's always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for continuing to hold down the fort.
Well, you know, we do what we can for as many as possible. So if we just get to our agenda, because, you know, we got things to do, people to see, and issues to solve. Our agenda topic today is the C.R.O.W.N Act. And so a lot of people are unfamiliar with this, but I actually think you and I are the perfect people to talk about this, because this has to do with hair.
Hair.
Right? Yeah. And so the C.R.O.W.N Act, which is creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. And it really is legislation to ensure that women of color, particularly Black women, have the ability to wear their hair in natural hairstyles. And so 17 states have passed this law. Some additional cities have passed this law. But let's first talk about why there's even a need for this law. I mean, we're talking about hair. Why is there a need to have a law to be able to wear your hair the way it naturally grows out of your head?
Quite honestly, it's because our hair has been controversial for a long time because our hair is different in texture and volume, and what we can do with our hair is very unique in a lot of ways. And how we have had to operate in a world of quote unquote professionalism has a lot to do with our hair has been the center of attention for a lot of that. How do you show up? Is it professional? Will people respect you, or will people take you seriously if you wear your hair natural versus straightened through either, heating techniques or chemicals that are now causing harm to, that we're finding out causes harm to our bodies in a lot of different ways. But it's just simply because our hair is just very different and folks don't really know what to do with that.
Well, and I think, so you and I both have natural hair. Mm-hmm. And we have both faced the issues of having natural hair. Mm-hmm. And I want to touch on that professionalism one first, because I think we are now in a time period where more people are wearing their hair naturally and it's more readily accepted. Mm-hmm. But I know when I first started wearing my hair naturally, it was seen as controversial, which was crazy to me. I'm like, it's hair. And it was always neat. It was always combed. It was always clean, but it's still, is it professional? Mm-hmm. And so professional was often defined through the standards for white women, which is actually unfair, as we do not have the same hair texture mm-hmm. as white, or a lot of Black women don't have mm-hmm. the same hair texture as white women, right? But I think this issue of professionalism is a big one. And so mm-hmm. as we talk about employers and setting standards for professionalism, how has Eurocentric ideas, focus, priorities sort of infiltrated this definition, and what can employers do to make sure that their definition of professionalism is really inclusive of all cultures?
I think, like most systems, the measuring stick in this country tends to be Eurocentric in its nature, whether we're talking about hair, whether we're talking about how we speak, how we dress, because that was the focus in sort of where how people show up in this country, and so it's not surprising that it shows up in little ways, even though there are not necessarily laws on the book that say you can't wear your hair how it comes, and how people treat you will signal to you that that's not acceptable here. And so what I think we have, right now to do, or what employers can do to make sure that they are being proactive and not sort of reactive, in the sense that, hey, somebody came to HR because an employer or a colleague, someone said something about someone else's hair and, made a big fuss about it. I think you really have to go through your manuals, right? Your employee handbooks, where you're talking about what it means to show up professional, and look for language like, unkept hair. Like, what does that mean? What is unkept, right? In my book, is it dirty, right? Is it messy? Is it, does it in any way indicate poor hygiene? Like, those things make more sense than unkept, because everybody's definition is different of what that means. Is a twist out unkept, right? Are all twist all over, right? Is that unkept, right? So that leaves a little bit more subjectivity. And so I'm going through those handbooks with a fine-tooth comb to say, why was this language included? When did we put this language in there? And does it need to still be there?
And I think really even having some of those conversations and really thinking about what your expectations are when people show up. When I started working in corporate America, I had a boss tell me that my natural fro was intimidating. And it's like, is it going to jump off my head and start smacking people around? Like, how is hair intimidating, right? And not understanding the fact that, and I had decided to go natural after having straightened hair, because I have very coarse hair that is extremely curly and extremely resistant. And so I would put relaxers on my hair, where you're supposed to leave them on for 20 minutes. I had to leave them on for at least 45. You get chemical burns. My hair still wouldn't be straight. It was always a battle. And I just didn't want to fight with my hair anymore. And I was doing so much damage to it, trying to fit into this idea of professionalism. Then you add on top of that, I think with Black women, there's a lot of identity in a hair decision, right? So if you're going to have straightened hair, especially if it's a relaxed hair, or if you're going to press your hair, if you're going to wear natural hairstyles, if you're going to wear your hair short, these all have some weight and significance with Black women that I don't think that they have in other communities. But it had nothing to do with professionalism. I had to make decisions based on what was happening with me and my hair. But I'm being judged for that. And no room for the other things that I have to take into consideration, or the hour and a half I was having to spend curling my hair every morning before going to work, just to really make sure that my hair was done when it was straightened. So all of these things that I have to take into consideration, but if I wear my hair naturally, it's intimidating for people.
That raises a few thoughts for me. One is about, people really don't have any idea what really goes into the decision of what to do with your hair for Black people. You mentioned, straightening your hair and your hair being resistant. We live in Florida, right? It is humid as all get out here, right? And so the minute I walk out the door, I'm really going to look a mess, right? Because even though I've tried to straighten it with, heating products, the humidity in the air, the moisture in the air is going to like soak it right back up, and I really won't look presentable for work, right? And so then you go the next step and you do the chemical pieces, right? But the chemical burns that are on your scalp are so serious, and we just do it like it's another day in the park, right?
Right.
But now we see all of these class action lawsuits about how those chemicals are impacting women's reproductive organs now, right? Like I think we're letting these chemicals sit on our skulls for 20 to 45 minutes at a time, every 6 to 8 weeks. Some folks, if your hair is really coarse, it's longer than that. And so we are jeopardizing our health. And a lot of us have, myself included, I got my first relaxer when I was a little girl.
Right.
Right. And so there's years and years of that sort of stress on your body, not just your hair. Right. So the decisions that we're making around our hair are not just literally about the physical texture and the presentation. It is also about the life we may want later on down the line, where these decisions are impacted, or even making the decision, so I'm going to wear it natural, but I'm going to lock, right? We both had locks at one point, right? And then having to worry about what people thought about how you were going to wear your locks. And so all of those decisions are going into all of those factors are going into the decision of how I choose to present myself at work. And I can't help but think about, I think I've told you this story before. I was finishing up my doctorate program, and I went on an interview in the Midwest at a university, and I was 5 weeks postpartum with my second child. So I had braids. And I wore braids because, who has time to do their hair when they have
a newborn?
When you have a newborn, plus a 2-year-old at home, right? And so I went on this interview, and before I even stepped foot on the plane, maybe I should take my braids out and just wear my hair, pull it back in a bun, because that's what I was doing at the time. And I was like, no, because when I get back home, I'm going to be stuck with not being able to do my hair. And so I decided to leave my braids. And during my interview, I was asked, where was I going to go to get my hair done? Why does that matter? I'm here to talk with you about my research interests, how I'm going to contribute to this university. But you're asking me, where am I going to go to get my hair done? Right? And even if it was just a question out of curiosity, right? And it was just really genuinely trying to understand my culture, that was actually unprofessional, more unprofessional than my hair,
right,
actually being in braids. And so it's not a decision that we take lightly. And that probably was one of the factors when I got the email that I wasn't a cultural fit, because that's what came back. And I immediately knew why, because I didn't fit into this world, or whatever this world was. And so the decision that we make have real life implications for our health and for our future career prospects.
Well, and I want to jump back to this health situation, because there are all these studies that are coming out now, whereas the majority of women, definitely historically, but I'd definitely say like the 70s and 80s, and even into the 90s, if you were straightening your hair, you were using chemicals to do so. That may be about half and half now. So there are all these studies that are showing that the relaxers have been causing, as you said, reproductive issues. And I think about, they've been specifically linked to fibroids, and the rate at which Black women have fibroids so much higher than any other racial group. I'm like, are relaxers the reason why? Right? So this is a multi-layered conversation. Are we creating conditions that are causing women to feel like they have to make choices that impact their health for simply how their hair is presenting in spaces? And I think we have to really think about the weight of that, So for instance, I have a lot of hair, as you can see, and a lot of volume with that. And to wear it out, and it's big and it's audacious, and its presentation, but and in some realms it may be seen as unprofessional. But is it in any way preventing me from delivering the information, and I'm coming in and I'm dressed this way? No, I don't have the close cropped, or I don't have the straight hair. And truthfully, straight hair gives my head the appearance of being even bigger than it is, right? So I like a big hairstyle because I'm a big person and a big personality. But no, it's not what anybody who is Caucasian is likely going to have as their hairstyle. But really thinking about that differently and thinking about the expectations you have for that hair, right? And what you also think that hair means. I think that's the funny part for me is, why is there so much weight on hair? It's hair. Dead skin cells. Like, it's hair. But why is there all of this importance placed on it when in some cases that gets placed above the knowledge, the skill set, the ability to do the job? How do we address that in workplaces?
I'm always one for tough conversations, Regina. And I don't shy away from that. I really do think we have to, one, we probably need to check out who all is in the room, right? Who's making these decisions about who gets hired, who sits in on the panel interviews. Is it all one type of person? Because I think those types of things, and not to say, that an all-white panel can't be, saying, hey, like, we're missing this person's bigger character because she doesn't look like us or he doesn't look like us. And so I really think it serves companies well to, first of all, have diversity in all facets of the organization, be it from leadership down to frontline workers. Diversity needs to be throughout. And especially when we're talking about making decisions about who's promoted, who gets next level access, who moves on to the next round, those people also need to be diverse, because there are inevitably, unintentionally, probably most times subconsciously, decisions that you're making about a person, judgments you're making about a person based on how they're presented, in particular if it is not like how you would present.
Right. And I think this is also important because we're sort of talking about some unwritten rules, but there are also some places that have written rules. You can't wear your hair in braids. You can't have locks. There was the student who was wrestling who the referee made him cut his locks on the spot in order to wrestle. And as a person who had locks, that hurt my heart. But it's also the fact that I understood what cutting the locks meant in a way that the referee did not, because you don't just cut locks. Like, that's a whole process in and of itself as well. But what about places that have argued that for safety purposes or for consistency, we want, like all of the ballet people have to have their hair straight and pulled into a bun, right? These kinds of things where it's a uniformity, it's safety, it's we don't want anybody to make a statement. So just like we say, you can't have blue hair, you can't have locks in your hair. What about those kinds of things that where natural hairstyles have often been either equated to being outside of the norm or making some type of revolutionary kind of statement?
Hair can't make a statement; it's just hair. But what I would say, in particular around the safety concern, because there was the issue recently around the firefighters who wanted to have a close-shaven beard. Not a full-on, a big beard, but because they were having skin issues with actually putting a razor to their skin to become clean-shaven. And one of the reasons that was cited was a safety concern with masks and things like that. And so my question is always, well, did we test? Did we really try? Who was a part of the trial? when you were sort of even making these rules? And could these, and I go back to time because I think there were times, right, when there were all white firefighters. And so perhaps during that time, everybody could shave. It's not a problem. But now you have diversity in these fields. And so the rules that were applicable then may not be applicable now. A black male putting a razor to his skin may cause infections and ingrown hairs and things like that that really are health concerns for them. And we haven't even tested whether or not the mask is going to work with a close shave. And so my question is always, okay, it's a safety concern, but have we tested? And who did we test with? And when was the last time we tested? Because I think we can probably get past a lot of things just by let's test it now,
right?
See what happens.
Well, and understanding why did we have this rule? Does that still apply? Mm-hmm. You know, just because that's what we've always done isn't a good reason to keep doing it. And really thinking about the culture and the issues in the society now. I think another thing, and it seems like a small thing, but it is a huge one, is educating yourself about hair. So I have made this statement several times. I said, most Black women can tell you how white women do their hair. I have met very few white women who can tell you how Black women do their hair, right? And understanding how hair works and the fact that it's not the same. Please don't have the same expectations for the hair process. Even for the fact, like when I had locks, I would tell people that this was my wash day. And they were like, you mean the whole day? And yes, that's the whole day. Like that is, for me to do my locks, that is a 6 to 8 hour process. And I need you to understand that and understand why I make certain decisions, swimming, where I'm going to go, and if I'm going to be able to get sweaty. All these kinds of things go into that. But becoming more knowledgeable about the different textures of hair, what's required, what hair care is like, what's needed. I remember there was the one girl in school where she was asked to stop moisturizing her hair. And I was like, you don't even know what that means when you ask that because somebody didn't like the shea butter scent. So, but understanding more about it will help bridge some of those gaps.
Absolutely.
And I also feel like hair is a little bit of a touchy subject too, right? Because I've had some of the most offensive things that have been asked of me have been in relationship to my hair. Because in addition to people asking if they can touch my hair, right? I actually had someone ask if they could pet my hair. Which I want to, please do not ask that question. You know, people are not exhibits, right? They're not on display. It's not a zoo.
The answer is no.
The answer is no. Don't do that. But, you know, and I know some of that's just a curiosity, but people need to educate themselves on that process. But also understanding what goes in here, what doesn't. And I feel like people are very, very sensitive about it, or can be, but some of the comments that get made are so wildly offensive around hair. So it becomes this place that seems really insignificant, but has monumental importance for people.
That's right. Or folks asking, is that your real hair? Or what does your real hair really look like, right? Those questions. And even, you know, and it goes down even to like my children. Like I have 2 daughters. And even as they're growing and they're playing with their friends, like their friends will like throw sand and everybody gets sand in their hair. And it's like, oh, it's fun. And I'm like, I love you, sweetie, but you can't have sand thrown in your hair because we can't wash your hair every day.
Right.
Right? And that sand is going to dry your hair out like nobody's business. And so we have to, have to have that conversation with glitter, small particles. Those things cannot be placed in your hair.
Water.
And you have to tell your friends and educate your friends and say, I can't, if you're getting ready to throw the pause, let me go step to the side so you can throw the dirt and then I'll come back, because really it is so much work to have to, now I got to undo all of these twists, got to wash your hair, condition your hair, we got to go through the whole moisturizing process. It's a lot to go through for some little girls who do not like to have their hair washed anyway. And it's certainly hard for mommy too, but even having them have conversations with their friends that, our hair is a little bit, we're friends, we're going to always be friends, but my hair is just a little bit different and I can't have that happen. Right.
And even the fact that, I had to explain to friends when we had sleepovers and things, I have to tie my hair up at night, right? Because the friction will break it off as well as it gets dried out. And I am trying to keep as much moisture as possible in my hair. There are all of these differences, and the more that people are educated and aware, the less likely they are to make an inappropriate or insensitive comment. And again, this seems like a weird conversation to be having on a conversation that's targeted toward employers, but I find that hair conversations that are some of the most concerning happen in the workplace.
That's right.
And are around work issues.
That's right.
Right. My friends don't really care about how I wear my hair. I've had far more hair conversations at work or about work that I've had anywhere else. So this is really an important topic. And in Florida, where we don't have the C.R.O.W.N. Act, we still have employers who have the ability to put some restrictions on how women wear their hair. And the overwhelming majority of those restrictions really target and impact Black women more so than any other group.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, again, this is sort of an odd conversation. So I'm going to do our wrap up today a little differently. And so as opposed to the one big takeaway from the conversation, I'm going to say, what is the one thing that you think employers should do to really support women being able to wear their hair however they choose?
One, I think you can adopt a C.R.O.W.N. Act type of language in your handbooks. It's not the same as sort of legislative bill from a state or a municipal standpoint, but businesses have a lot of flexibility to be able to say, okay, the language here, let's take some of that language and make sure it's incorporated in our sort of grooming section so that folks know that we won't, we accept your hair however it grows from your head. And so in addition to adopting that language, also reviewing previous language to see if there has been any, leftover language from yesteryear that just isn't applicable right now. And then the last thing I'll say, you asked for one, but the last thing I'll say is I like data. So check your HR data and see if you've had any complaints around sort of the grooming policy that is related to hair, and see if some language in the handbook, some adjustments in the handbook, and maybe even some education around this newly adopted language will help mitigate some of that.
And I think mine is going to be to take that a step further, because when I think about the places where I ran into hair challenges, it wasn't language that was in the handbook. It wasn't the policy. And it wouldn't have been something that HR would have been able to identify. It would have just been comments that were made, sometimes even to be helpful, right? offhanded remarks. So I think it's also really about talking to your employees. Do you feel like you can wear your hair? And talking to Black women specifically, do you feel like you can wear your hair however you choose in our organization? Do you feel like we have set some unspoken standards? Because this is oftentimes about the unspoken standards that some people have. And you may also find that, oh, yeah, the marketing department and advertising, sure, we come how we want to, but accounting, oh, it's a whole different story, right? So really talking about different departments all over different levels, right? So for instance, maybe the lower level employees feel like they can wear their hair however they want to, but your senior level staff doesn't. So a lot of conversations to determine if it's an issue, because I think you may instantly write this off that it's not, when if you talk to some employees, it may be more of an issue than you think.
Agreed.
All right. Well, it's always great to sit and talk with you. We could just sort of run down the list of things to talk about. But I'm really glad that we were able to spend this time today talking about this issue, because I think it's one that really flies under the radar, but has tremendous importance, particularly for Black women, but really makes a statement about that inclusivity and belonging that a lot of companies want to make sure that they are able to achieve. And this is one way that they might need to address that.
That's right. Thank you, Regina, for having me.
Well, thank you, Kim. It's always a pleasure to have you. And thank you for joining us for today's podcast. Please click that button and subscribe so that you can be updated whenever we have new content. And be sure to like us. We like being liked, like everyone else does. So please do so. And we will see you next week in the conference room. Have a great day.